How fat is stored in human female bodies in comparison to male bodies? During menstrual cycle, pregnancy, lactation, fertility period, and menopause. White fat cells are cells known to be as storage for extra calorie, which is in the form of sugar and fat, is stored as white fat in white fat cells. But fat cells are endocrine glands which secrete a lot of hormones. And these hormones like leptin, resistin, adiponectin, angiotensinogen, cytokines, and insulin growth like factor number 1. So fat cells are endocrine glands which secrete hormones which are important for metabolism of the body and also for fertility. If the female has no leptin hormone in her body, she will not be able to get pregnant at all. So, the woman cannot get leptin in her blood, either because it is genetic or because of leptin resistance. It is just like insulin resistance. When the leptin hormone is high and the cells in the brain get resistant to leptin hormones due to eating all the time. There are people affected by lipodystrophy. Lipofat dystrophy means abnormal fat cells. They don't have white fat cells and they are very, very thin indeed. But their basal metabolic rate is very low, and they suffer from a lot of chronic metabolic diseases like diabetes type 2, hypertension, cardiovascular diseases, atherosclerosis, fatty liver, even dementia and Alzheimer. And they have fatty liver and high fat storage in the abdomen only. And this abdominal fat or visceral fat is very toxic, which has many side effects, because it causes inflammation all over the body and leading to this chronic metabolic syndrome. Female hormones, the estradiol group or estrogen, it is made from the cholesterol produced in the liver, and they are steroid hormones. And these hormones decide where the fat is stored in a human female body during the reproductive life. So estrogen, it control or signal where the place where the fat is stored. So the fat is stored under the skin, subcutaneous fat, and on the buttocks, thighs, hips, breasts. But androgen hormones, male hormones, in male as well as in female after the menopause, when the period stops, the female will have also androgen hormone and very low estrogen hormone, female hormones. So the fat will be stored in the abdomen, around the abdominal viscera like the liver, the pancreas, the stomach, and the intestine. The male hormones are inert, not like the estrogen female hormones. So, during the pregnancy and lactation, the metabolic rate of the female body is very high, and it is the highest. And there is high estrogen hormone. And the brain wants to make sure that there is enough energy stored to be enough for the growing fetus inside the uterus, and for the enlargement of the uterus, and to have enough energy for the growth of the new fetus inside the uterus. Also, during lactation, the brain wants to know that there is enough energy to produce milk, which is essential for the growth of the newborn babies. So, during the pregnancy and during lactation, the estrogen hormone is high and the fat will be stored under the skin because the estrogen decide where, WHERE, the fat is stored. But a progesterone hormone, which is high after ovulation in the monthly menstrual cycle, as well as it is high during the pregnancy, it decides the quantity or the amount of the fat stored in the female bodies. Progesterone is high and it works like insulin resistance, and this is limited resistance, and it happens in acute form and for a very short time for a healthy biological reason and needs. It is unlike chronic insulin resistant, which happen over a long period of time and of high level of insulin, which causes all chronic metabolic diseases, like all the branches diseases which sprout out from one stem or one tree, which is called insulin resistance. And these diseases or branches are type 2 diabetes, hypertension, cardiovascular disease, atherosclerosis, prediabetes, obesity, dementia, and Alzheimer. So estrogen, it has a protective effect of making more fat in female bodies, store more fat by progesterone. And this is the body, how it store the fat due to estrogen is by a method which is called hyperplasia. Hyperplasia means more number of fat cells. HYPER, plasia, PLASIA. This is a healthy method of storing the fat because the fat cells are divided into many fat cells to store the fat, and the fat cell size is small but increase in number, and this is very healthy, metabolically healthy, and the fat will go to the liver to be burned. But in the menopause, where androgen hormones are high in female body as well as in the males, the androgen hormones will store the fat in the abdomen by a method which is called hypertrophy, meaning the size of the white fat cells become bigger and increase in size and store fat more and more until it is becoming very big and it is pushed away from the capillary blood vessel. So it will be starved from oxygen and nutrient, and this big fat cell will die because of starvation. So they send signal to the blood vessel to grow so that they can get some oxygen and nutrient, which is not as good as normal, but at least they will survive. But these big fat cells will store fat more and more, but they cannot burn that fat. Meaning this big fat cell will obey the insulin to store the fat, but they cannot obey the insulin to keep it stored. No, they will break down and they will leak their fat inside the blood, and the cytokine and all inflammatory chemical will be discharged in the blood, and this will be carried all over the body, causing subtle chronic inflammation in the body. And over a period of time, then we will develop chronic metabolic diseases. This is for the survival of the fat cells, because these fat cells will increase in size 10 times the normal size of fat cells. And this is the cause of the problem associated with obesity and abdominal visceral fat, insulin resistant. Now, what is the treatment? Is to do intermittent fasting, prolonged fasting. But more important than the length of fasting is how well we end that fasting. Meaning the quantity of food we eat, the quality of food we eat, the frequency of eating, and the order of eating, and the combination of food. So we start our first meal as a small portion, and the order of food, it should be consistent or contain protein, vegetables, fibers, so that the blood glucose will not be raised to a high level, and the insulin also will not be spiking to a high level. And this is very important, because if we keep the blood sugar in the level in the blood and insulin level in the blood lower, and for a short period of time, this is very healthy. So fasting and also exercises, because muscle fibers will use fatty acids as energy, and estrogen burn the fat 40% more by itself, irrespective of the exercises and muscle fibers. So ketosis, meaning eating ketogenic diet, which is high fat diet, very little protein and very little carbohydrate or no carbohydrate, or eating no carbohydrate and no sugar, this will produce ketones, the same as fasting. Fasting works also by ketosis. And this is ketone, which is produced by endogenous method, meaning the body will produce it. And it is not ketone which is used as supplement from outside sources, but inside the body, by the liver. And these, the fat cells will increase in their metabolic rate of burning the energy 3 times during fasting. But if we expose ourselves to the cold and the white fat cells change into beige fat cells and into brown fat cells, the metabolic rate of these brown fat cells will be 8 times more or even 10 times more than ordinary white fat cells. This is because brown fat cells contain a lot of mitochondria, which are called the battery of the cell and produce heat. And this method is called uncoupling, coupling, coupling, meaning the brown fat cell produce energy as heat. It wasted as heat, but this has a very important biological and metabolical function. But coupling by the cell means that the cell and the mitochondria of the cell produce energy only for the function of that cell without producing and wasting energy as heat. It is called coupling, coupling, mean exact function of the cell. So exposure to cold is very important because it will change the white fat cell into beige cells, which contain more mitochondria, and the color will become a little beige, and this process is called paging. And then the beige cells will change into a brown fat cell, and this method is called browning, changing beige fat cells into brown fat cells. So the ketone work to the paging process of white fat cell, and also sleep. It is very important if it is of good quality, because during sleep there will be repair of DNA damage and washing of the proteins which is accumulated in the brain due to its activity during the day. And there is a stimulation of a growth hormone, which is the hormone for growth, repair, and healing. So all healthy lifestyle will be helpful and protective to the body. The best source for protein is the animal sources, because the amino acid complement are more perfect and it is more bioavailable, meaning the body can absorb it better, and the amount of iron is also more. And we need mostly the amino acid leucine, 2.5 grams per day, to increase muscle mass and bone mass. But vegetarian and vegan, it is good. They eat their protein from plant sources, but they need to get deeply educated about supplement of high quality, organic, to compensate for the defect in their nutrition. So the protein powder, which is processed, and it is mostly from peas protein, it's very concentrated, and they use quite a large quantities of peas to produce the protein. And this protein will be containing a high quantity of toxic heavy metal like lead and arsenic. And this is very well known. So the advice for young people who try to increase their muscle mass and bone mass by taking these proteins from plant sources to stop. So I hope this knowledge is helpful for your health, and keep healthy, keep learning, and God blessing, and goodbye.